Let's go. All right. So just before we started this meeting, we did the lay aside prayer. That is not a prayer that was made up or from somebody's imagination. It's all in the book. We speak big book here, and it all comes from this chapter. So the preceding paragraph here says that we lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves. We commence to get results. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. When we were snorkeling through Bill's story, there's this on page 12, the third paragraph. Ebby says to Bill, he says, "Hey man, you don't need to believe in my God. You don't have to use the same God I have. Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" And you can see the way Bill writes it here. There's a massive shift for him, because all of a sudden, that God that I was told about when I was a kid, or the one that I think is running the show and running the world and sitting with a big white beard up in the sky, all of a sudden, you're inviting me to say, "No, Nadia, why don't you bring your own God to the table?" Because the churches that I went to as a kid, they didn't allow that. Well, that's what I remember. Remember, I have this alcoholic magnifying mind. And I did learn later on in the game that I was making up a lot of stuff because I could not differentiate the true from the false. Anyway, nonetheless, the thing is, right now, new in, been around a while, coming in and out, and you just can't see whatever. Just right now, just for a second, if you've got a journal or in your book, line out there just a little exercise tonight, tomorrow, whenever you get time. Write your own conception of God. Now, listen to me. Not the one that all the movies have told us, those movies where they, like, God makes an appearance on earth and he takes a human form and he's like super funny or he glows or whatever. Not the Hollywood version. Not the childhood church version, not the ones that you want to impress on people because you want to come into AA and look all spiritual and, knowledgeable. Get quiet for 3-4 minutes really quickly and just jot down, what is your own conception of God? But go into your heart space, not the one that's mean and cruel and the one that you're trying to get out of your life and you got all the prejudice against. No. Remember, the great reality is deep down inside. So go into your heart and just, who is God to you? Who is your own conception? As inadequate as it might be. It says here, our own conception, that's the one that you're going to go do when you got time, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach to who? To God. We can make an approach to God and to effect contact with him. Oh, wow, that's so amazing. Like, those are some powerful promises there. We get to approach God and we get to have contact with God. You just got to have some idea, just some feeling. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, the spirit of the universe underlying the totalities of things, here's a promise, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided, here's a condition, here's a warning, here's an action we got to take, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek action, seek him. To us, the realm of the spirit, we just hung out there together, we just did a 1-minute meditation in the realm of the spirit, us together, is broad, roomy, all-inclusive. Bob D has got he's witnessing amazing miracles in the Hindu and the Muslim states over in the Middle East and India. Never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly, here's an action word, seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. That was one of my one of the beefs that I had with the churches. And I'm sorry, I've gone back to my Christian faith. And I tell you, it's like recovery on steroids for me. And I'm not telling you, we're not prescribing to anybody whatever. This is my experience. This is where I've gone with my spiritual journey. But I love this, that it says it is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never forbidding. I didn't experience that when I was in high school, you know, when homosexuality came out and drug using and tattoos. And like I was told, you're going to go to hell. You're going to go to hell if that's your deal, you know? And yeah, you're telling me, the God that you guys are going to introduce me to in these pages is all inclusive, never forbidding. Wow. There's some really cool characteristics you can assign to this new God that you're going to go and venture into. And if the word God really makes you like everything on you stand up, yeah, this chapter allows you to find some new terms for him. There's a couple of names: creative intelligence, spirit of the universe. Remember last week we said one of the exercises, and this is one of the most powerful, and it's going to explain it now, is write all the capitalized spiritual terms in this chapter. Write them out in your step work journal and write a description next to it. Google the words. When therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. And guys, I had a lot of people speaking to me of God when I was a child and a teenager, and through my 20s and 30s and 40s. You know, I went for a lot of counseling, and my family members and friends and groups that I got involved in, and a lot of them gave me some really sick, twisted ideas about who God was, and it just pushed me further and further and further away. But when I read this, it says, when we speak to you of God, and I thought about the people who have spoken to me of God, and I thought about the sick man's prayer, that perhaps they were spiritually sick too. Perhaps they were fettered by old ideas and limiting beliefs too, you know, and they imposed that on me. If the word God hounds you, again, I'm going to invite you. Here's another idea. Line out the word God and put the spiritual principles: more humility, more patience, more tolerance. If you go to a meeting, don't be the first one to want to speak. Practice humility, because you know you like speaking. So practice more God, practice more humility. If you're at a AA meeting, if you're at a face-to-face and you don't want to go greet somebody, you know that you don't like greeting people, practice more friendliness. Go to the door, show them where the toilet is. The spiritual principles, because that's the power. That's the power we're trying to connect you to. Do not, this applies to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice, guys, there is one huge instruction in this book on page 58, third paragraph. It tells us that if we do not do this, our result will be nil, nil, nil. You will not experience recovery. You will not experience being in a recovered state. You will not experience happy, joyous, and free if you do not do this one thing. And that's let go of old ideas. Let go of old ideas. Page 58, the third paragraph. Some of us try to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go. Absolutely. And this, in this paragraph, in this chapter specifically, we are begging you to let go of old ideas, prejudices, limiting beliefs. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms, and that includes the word God, deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. And there's the exercise that I just spoke about. Write all the spiritual terms. So we've got our first exercise is identify all the capitalized words in We Agnostics, and then what does it mean to you? Expand on that. The second spiritual exercise, write down all your prejudices. Meditation, only meant for someone living in a monastery. Prayer, got to have a rosary bead for it, and it's got to be 50 Hail Marys. I don't know, Jesus, it's my fault that he died. Like, write all your prejudices down. And I'm going to be using a lot of Christian terms tonight because, like I say, that's where I'm at the moment in my journey. So bear with me and drop your prejudices. Pray for me or talk to your sponsor if it's grinding you. I love you guys. Bill, go ahead.
Just had an intuitive thought. Only in this country or part of the world is this chapter necessary. I don't think if Bill Wilson was an alcoholic in India, there would be this chapter because there wouldn't be a dispute. So I looked up the difference. So what is a better, the Abrahamic religion, which is what we were brought up in, or the Eastern religion? Eastern religions seem to be better because they are not dogmatic. Eastern religions explain the truths about life, cause, and effect, and how to attain inner peace and happiness. The religion that we're brought up in is about authority, God, Allah, Yahweh, the Pope, pastors, ministers, etc. They're all about the figureheads dictating what you should do or not do, and what and how you are punished if you don't abide. It's all about control and cannot be questioned. Eastern religions do not punish you if you do not follow them, nor do they actively seek followers to convert. Eastern religions are about the individual and are selfless. They do not need to seek your participation, while Abrahamic religions are about the religion, about selfish, jealous, vindictive, and that you must follow their rules and commands. I just had an intuitive thought if this book was written anywhere else in the world where they didn't teach that you had to believe this way or go to hell, there wouldn't be so many people afraid to approach this realm of the spirit. If I'm in trouble and I can't solve the problem, if I'm anywhere else, I'm going to come seeking the solution. Here we come in and realize that this is a spiritual malady, and we don't have to overcome disbelief in God or questioning belief in God. We've got to overcome the prejudices that are blocking us from the power because we're so skewed. And some of these experiences, and they wander right into AA, don't get it twisted. And you can tell I can use Christianity as a position of a selfish religion. Look what God did for me. God saved me. I don't know about you guys, but and becomes just as self-absorbed and self-obsessive. I remember, and I say this now that we're on the recording. Someone in my family, when one of the members died, said, I think that this person accepted Jesus before he died, as if I had to worry about not only paying for a funeral, but now watching him burn in torment in hell forever and ever and ever. What a concept. Why? Because I didn't swallow your dictates. It's no wonder why most of us coming over here would say, I don't want anything to do with that. Bill's grandfather said he would not allow anyone to tell him how to think or worship. Bill followed along the same line. And all of a sudden, here comes Ebby with a solution. And Bill's prejudice almost killed him. Besides, let him rant. My gin would outlast his proselytizing. What a concept. And there he was alone in the room, knowing that he was going to go to the bitter end. We were talking about this morning. The reason that the effectiveness of these spiritual experiences were so overwhelming is because people were on the cusp of insanity or death and they knew it. Now what happens is we're promoting these people in the big book that are finding themselves all over the pages and saying alcohol ceased to be a luxury and became a necessity. I have not in a long time now just seen someone come into AA on the verge of delirium tremens. But a lot of them act like they were once they get sober and get a hold of this book. I cannot afford to be deceived about the magnitude of the depth of this disease or my self-centeredness or how close to the end of the road I am and want to come in here and sell you something that's not real so that you'll think that I meet the description. You'll find me all over the book. You leave aside the drink question and ask me why I'm having such a heavy going of life. Why are these bedevilments and the horsemen trampling through my life? You can take the drink question away and I will find myself on all those pages. But because I want you to think that I'm sicker than what I ever could be, I'm going to tell you how I drank the clock around 24 hours a day for 10 years, yet was able to maintain a college degree, a master's degree, raise a family, start a law firm, and make $200,000 and tell you that we have the same sickness. There's something wrong with that story. And we come in there and present that. because we think that alcoholism has to do with the degradation and the depths of drinking. It's a spiritual malady, or guess what? If alcohol did all that to me and you got me off of that, I'd never ever drink again. I can't afford to pay that price. Something way deeper wrong with us than that. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. I heard a guy today on the meeting come into a Zoom meeting and say, "Oh no, when I got sober, I knew that I was in trouble because I went into a church and then they passed the plate and I wanted to say to them, wake up, boo-boo. No one on this platform knows what you're talking about. We're not in a church. We're in a computer and we don't even have a plate or an altar." I hang on to stories that used to be appealing to the masses that no longer make sense. God is using Zoom, I believe, to bring in a whole new version of Alcoholics Anonymous. In fact, I'm making a vote that we close central office. It's costing too much money. All I got to do is go to Google.
God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Thank you. All right, on page 47, in the middle of that first paragraph, at the beginning of this process, because he's going to talk about the beginning and when the spiritual experience happens, all in one sentence here. He says, at the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth. So we've asked you to bring some willingness to the table, and here you are every Monday. You're showing up. You've got your pens out. The highlighters are going. The frowns are on the faces. You're scribbling away. The willingness is there. Then we're asking you for a lot of honesty, vigorous honesty. In fact, it's mentioned 5 times in one paragraph. Now we're asking you for some open-mindedness, because those 3 things are the essentials for recovery. And that's in the spiritual experience, page 567. The 568, Rob will put the page number in. You'll find that those are the 3 essentials we need for recovery. But this is the solid foundation. I came into this program in 2014, December 2014. I've only now celebrating 4 years. All right. I came in and out. And the reason was that I did not have a solid cornerstone in place. I had so much gall in me towards the word God, but I didn't want to show you guys that because I could see how much love and affection and praise you were giving this higher power. And I was sitting feeling like a big old fraud, like a big old fat fraud. So I didn't say a word about it. And it was when my sponsor helped me, and the last time I came in, to knock this prejudice out of the way and to beg me for open-mindedness. So it says, at the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood him. Afterward, what is he talking about? He's talking about after the spiritual experience, which then afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. So what I understood from this piece here is I came into these rooms, loads of prejudice against all spiritual terms, even meditation and prayer. You know, I had such a one-dimensional relationship with all these spiritual terms, and this is a spiritual program. So it wasn't going in, it wasn't sinking in. It was just hitting this mirror that I was bouncing back to all of you so that you would all think I was Mrs. Recovery. In the meantime, nothing was going in because I was blocked. And it says all of a sudden, I could start accepting many things which seemed after my spiritual experience, after I had that awakening and I started working with others, not because I was told I had to, but because I really wanted to. I really felt love and empathy and compassion for other people. That selfishness had been drilled out of me. Well, it still knocks around. My step 11 tonight is going to look quite interesting, but I digress. I can now accept things like going to church, reading my friend's Torah, speaking through his book, his Jewish faith with him. I am open to these things now, totally open to them. In fact, I'm welcome. I'm so excited because the action word on page 46, that last paragraph, is seek And twice he says it, seek. We need to be seeking, going to the temples, going to the churches, going to see where our religious friends are right. Not if they're right, where they are right. And here's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful promise. That was growth. But here's a warning immediately straight after. But if we wish to continue growing, we had to begin somewhere. So we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. For anybody who was wondering where step 2 is, it's here. This is step 2. These next 3 lines, this is step 2. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Let's all take a step 2 with each other. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? And he's talking to the agnostic. Am I willing to believe? Because remember, the agnostic's not willing to believe that God's going to work for me. I knew there was a God. I had an idea, as much as I hated it. But I definitely thought that every time there was a handout of the manual to life or grace or forgiveness or peace of mind, I rocked up a day late every single time. And then he's talking to the atheist where he says, do I now believe? So he's addressing both atheist and agnostic. Sorry, willing to believe is the atheist. I apologize. As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, that's for the atheist, and does believe is for the agnostic, we emphatically assure him he's on his way. He's in the bus and he's driving with us. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. This, guys, is the epitome of this program. If we don't have that cornerstone in place, if you are doing your step work and you still have not given that word God any time a day, and you're just going through the motions, that cornerstone, man, because that's going to lay this foundation for this arch that we walk through, a free man at last.
You're just alluding to here, the simplicity of it is that self-reliance failed me. I need to get off of this self-reliance. I don't know what that power is. Can there be something other, something different, something greater? It just can't be self-reliance because that's not working. And I challenge you to say this. I don't think any of us really have a problem with that concept. What I think I struggled with the most, and after hearing some of your story, Nadia, I might suggest or submit for consideration. It was me yielding control of my life to this power was the problem. I didn't understand that the unmanageability took place with or without the drink, independently of putting the chemical in my body, whether I sobered up or not. My life was unmanageable. You heard a great piece of the puzzle came into play when I was at a meeting a few weeks ago, and the gal said, I was a model patient, a model client, a model inmate, and a model probationee. I said, me too. You give me structure and I can follow that. As long as you tell me what to do, I'll do it. As soon as I have to rely on my way of living, I'm lacking the needed power to get through life sober because life becomes very overwhelming. I see people do things almost naturally that make no sense to me. I try and figure it out before I do it. And by that time I combust and drink again because I'm trying to bring something into my ability that I can't. And what the step's really about, when we get to this point, I'm going to need a power other than self to solve my problem. Do I now believe or willing to believe that that's a possibility? They're saying as soon as I say yes, bam. Then what I get to do is be convinced that the reason I need there to be another power is because my way's not working. You mentioned the concept of God in the description in step 3, which was what some people did before I came along. They discovered they made a decision to turn their will and lives over to the care of God as they understood him. I see that word God, I go back to my construct or narrative of God. I process all that in a nanosecond and say, okay, Lord, I believe, let me get baptized and move on. If I could meet God at step 3 and know him or be known by him, I wouldn't need to take the rest of the steps. The decision is I'm going to quit running my life because it's not working. That's, so we get into this concept and say, oh, I had a problem with God. I never had a problem with God. I had a problem with a power greater than myself.
So I think let's we're going to expand on what you've just said, because the book talks about this a lot. It tells us later on, there's a little bit of a spoiler alert. It tells us to quit playing God. It tells us that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success, and self-reliance. So Rob, if you could drop those in the chat, that'd be awesome. We are not that power. All right.
Bob
So
must have got his slide projector fixed. We're halfway through the meeting and he finally puts in a picture of someone, probably a relative. Let me see.
is that the first
Because,
picture for the
because Nadja, the point is, what I do is at step 3, when I hear the word God, I give a definition to it. I give a description. I put clothes on it, a name on it, skin on it. And they're telling me that that's not what we're talking about here. Is there something other than me? Because if not, I'm doomed. Because I've already admitted that I'm powerless and can't handle it. If there's nothing else, guess what? Doctors are rightly loath to tell an alcoholic of his condition unless it's absolutely necessary, because it's a death sentence back then.
So, Bill, I'm so glad you just said that about God and the skin, and all of a sudden we've got this idea, and boom, our minds close shut again. Okay, because that's the alcoholic. We are self-will run riot. The minute we can break through that prejudice, okay, the minute we can break through that prejudice and just say maybe, just that's all I ask my sponsees. I just ask them to use the word maybe. Maybe, just maybe, there is something out there. There is some love, energy. There's just maybe. Once we can get to that point, and I see the eyes start to twinkle, I tell you now, it is a matter of a day or two. They start seeing miracles. They start phoning me and they say things like, man, I woke up with this problem in my mind this morning, and you will not believe it, but the reading was about it, the meeting was about it, someone called me out of the blue, and they start seeing miracles. Now that kind of that that cement in that foundation of faith that we're trying to build on, you cannot buy that stuff. You cannot make it up. You cannot make it up. And that's all I ask them. I just say, just come and just hang around and just say, maybe there is a power out there, okay? And start watching for it. Page 47, the second last paragraph. That was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith, which seemed difficult to believe. I had faith. I had utter faith in the ability that booze had for me. I had utter faith in the fact that if I bought that baggie, I was going to feel a whole lot better within a couple of minutes. I had utter faith that if I hit Tinder or hit Facebook Messenger, it'd be an hour and I'd have someone in my bed. I had faith, man. I had mountains of faith, but I had faith in those things. And now we're asking you that kind of faith, that kind of excess, that kind of power that you've practiced in that faith. Bring a little teaspoon of that over on this side and watch what happens. That flimsy reed becomes a loving, all-powerful hand of God. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. And that is the exercise that I spoke about right in the beginning of the meeting. Bring your own, there's this beautiful story of a child in preschool. and everyone's drawing. It's just freestyle, and everyone's got their crayons out and their little pencils, sharpening them up, and they're all drawing. And the teacher's walking around from desk to desk. One kid's drawing a fish, the other one's drawing the parents surfing from the weekend activities, and there's one little girl, and she's huddled over her drawing. And the teacher says to her, like, what are you drawing? And she looks up and she's like, God. And the teacher says, no, 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 you can't draw God. Nobody knows what God looks like. And she's like, well, not yet. Just bring that simplistic, like, draw your own little picture of God. Create your own little idea.
I will when she's done with the picture, right, Nadia? No one could draw God. They don't know what he looks like. They will when I'm done. So listen, let's talk about something for a minute. I mean, God forbid we get through this chapter by the end of the year. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. This was great news, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith, which then seemed difficult. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, no one ever presented me with a spiritual approach, Nadia. They all presented me with a religious construct. There was always a religion attached to it. No one came to me and said, hey, guess what? I wish upon a star.
Mm-hmm.
Someone said, if you'll believe this, right? If you'll believe this, like Kurt Z says, I tried to believe what I couldn't believe, and I couldn't believe it. And I'll tell you what, I have to watch it, because there were a lot of times that God brought people to AA, and then in the name of Jesus, I started sending them to hell as soon as they got here. I remember a guy in the middle of the room was on the same side as I was, but I heard it coming out of his mouth. And I said to him, David, they just got here. Let's not send them to hell yet. What I try and do is impose my belief on you to increase my belief because of my honest doubt and prejudice, even towards my own religion. Because as much as I profess it, it's not working in my very life. So how is it that I come in here and I'm surrendered by alcohol and self-will? And I cry out to a God that I don't even know is there, that I don't put a name on, that I don't put clothes on, that I don't put skin on. And I say, if there's anyone out there, door number 3, please help, because I can't do it no more. And all of a sudden, a whole new perspective takes place. When I'm becoming from a position of knowing and knowing for sure, it makes me more agnostic than a guy who says I can prove there is no God. Isn't that insanity? I believe something that's not working to the bitter end, because I'm trying to preserve my spot in eternity while I'm destroying the life that he put me here to live.
Yeah.
My mind has been fettered by superstition, tradition, and fixed ideas, mostly those that were taught to the poor people that came before me. And I'll say this much, and then I'll get off my bandwagon. We're taught about a concept of God from a position of piety. In other words, I can't imagine that Isaiah, Jeremiah, Moses, David, or any of those people were anything but something that I could never be. And what it does is it takes away the humanity of each and every one of those people. I believe that the white light experience, I said this yesterday on a meeting, I'll say it again. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John spent time with the Jesus who sewed people's limbs back on when they fell off and put their eyeballs back in their heads. The Apostle Paul, who changed the world, never saw him, but he experienced an enlightenment much like Bill Wilson. And the following is that Bill Wilson wrote a bunch of letters to the Church of Corinth or the Foundation in New York. Right? Bill Wilson had a light, and he wrote a book, and we follow it, and we kind of canonize Bill Wilson. And we talk about Bill like he was the enlightened one, and we all follow what Bill did, just like they follow what Paul did. But what happened is some commercial foundation got a hold of the message and said, you people got to do this, this, and this if you want the light experience. No one can have the experience because we just can't seem to get there. And like our friend Steve, who puts this about, said the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous is not only can we have the experience once, but we can duplicate and recreate the experience anytime we're willing to go through prayer, meditation, and self-examination. And I may never give 10% of my money to anyone, including Alcoholics Anonymous, but it doesn't prohibit me from the relationship with God if I'm willing to set aside self and all my prejudice and preconceived notions. So that's pretty deep, but that's where it took. It almost killed me what I knew. I got baptized so many times they thought I was trying out for the swim team, mate.
And that's exactly it. There's two things. It says here, so it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. Just like Bill said. We can start where we're at. This program meets us where we're at when it comes to the God idea, because our ideas didn't work anymore. And another thing, Bill, while you were talking, you reminded me of a story of Charles Blondin, a famous trapeze artist. He goes across the Grand Canyon. It's I don't know, it's like many years ago, I think early 1900s. And it's his greatest party trick is he goes across the Grand Canyon on a trapeze rope or a tightrope. Sorry, tightrope. And he takes a wheelbarrow across. So he does one trip across, and all the audience and everybody's like, wow, and his hand just going applause and going nuts in the house. And then he turns around and he says to them, do you think I could do it again? And they're like, yeah, let's go. And he turns around and he does it again. And it's just the roof comes off, the crowds go wild and it's insane. And he says to them, do you think I could do this again? And they're like, yes, absolutely, yes, he can. And he says, all right, but who's going to get in the wheelbarrow this time? So why I'm telling you that story, when I look at these blocks in front of me, I've said this before, these are dead people that have risen. We were dead men walking, right? All we could think about was using and drinking and whatever, acting out and gambling and whatever else our affliction was, and whatever way this disease manifested in our lives, with food or money or sex or Netflix or overtasking, whatever it is. And here I am looking at people who've come alive. There's a light in their face. You are miracles, 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 miracles. And many newcomers sitting in here couldn't do more than 2 hours a day. And you're sitting here celebrating 90 days. 90 days. You're telling me that's not a miracle? And you're telling me, and I'm asking you to get in the wheelbarrow because something other than you made that happen. And you're going, I don't know.
What's the definition of a miracle, Aja?
You, Bill Swan.
No. What's the definition? I think we should look it up. If it's
Let's go
something
check
that
it out.
happens once in a lifetime and we've been able to duplicate it for 2 million times, let's quit blowing smoke up these newcomers' asses and tell them there's something that they're not.
Wow.
Well, let's find out what it is. What's the definition? We use that word an awful lot.
An extraordinary and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore attributed to a divine agency. What do you say, Bill?
Said that if we can duplicate it 2 million times and 47 other fellowships follow it, it might not be as miraculous as we believe. The miracle is that someone got a hold of it and wrote it down. All we're doing is following the recipe. The first cake that was made was probably miraculous to someone who never had cake. But I go to the store and now you got Betty Crocker, Jiffy, Duncan Hines. Those aren't miracles. Those are recipes.
Yeah.
Recipes. The miracle may be that I found the solution. Maybe that I found the solution. That might be the gift. Not everyone finds it.
We do beg of you to stick around.
Yeah, as long as we're on tape and they hear this divisiveness, I'll let you know that Nadja woke me from a sound nap to bring me in here. She should have let the dog lay.
And he's on fire. I mean, how's that possible? That is to be from a divine agency. All right. Bottom of page 47. Thanks for still sticking around with us. Besides a seemingly inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Handicapped. i.e., cannot move forward, cannot do much for yourself, cannot experience growth, cannot grow, cannot experience recovery, you are handicapped. We are handicapped, and us alcoholics are handicapped by that very serious sensitivity. You know, when, like I said, that first year, everyone was praying in the serenity prayer and God this and God that, and you got a bit, and I just would shut down and I'd get so annoyed. I couldn't wait for the hour to be over. That first year, while my skin was crawling all over my body, handicapped. I experienced no joy or freedom during that time, nothing. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. It's only an alkie who can write about another alkie like this. I mean, this is me to the T. This sort of thinking, what sort of thinking? That there isn't a power greater than ourselves, had to be abandoned, not surrendered. Nowhere in the book does it say surrender, by the way. Surrender is not a big book term. We talk about abandon because, guys, we cannot hold on to nothing. We have to abandon. We have to leave it aside, cast it aside.
Part of this really is speaking of why Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the main reasons they broke away from the Oxford group. And what happened is the Oxford group would go into the upper room. The alcoholics would be on a lower level because we were sub-Oxford human. And they would come down from the upper room and they would tell the alcoholic what God told them to tell the alcoholic. And alcoholics didn't want to be told anything that someone heard from God to tell us. We want to hear from God ourselves. The reason it's saying that this type of thinking had to be abandoned is because if I bristle with antagonism, you know what that's another word for, Nadia? Getting pissed off. In AA terms, it's called resentment, a term that many of us never knew till we came in here. What I did was get even with someone if they screwed me over. Now you tell me if a polite name for that is called resentment or revenge. But if I bristle with antagonism, the very hairs on the back of my head stand up because what you're doing is you're telling me I must believe something that I'm having a difficult time believing. So the reason that thinking has to be abandoned is resentment blocks me from the power. So you come along to AA and all of a sudden there's hope there. And I get you and buttonhole you in the corner that you got to believe a certain way. And all of a sudden the very thing that was surrendered to get you through the door wakes up and takes you back out because of what the book talks about. My own ignorance or stupidity, it calls it later on in the book. A lot of lives could have been saved if it weren't such stupidity. We don't even show intolerance of drinking as an institution because it says no one likes to be told anything about drinking from one who hates it. And no one likes to be told anything about God if it's their own perception. And even so, with my preconceived learning to what I believe to be true, I can sometimes find myself tainted in my deliverance, or even on the reverse side, put myself in a position of the new man that he's not in and start apologizing for the thing that's saving my life. Hey, guess what they used to tell us at the Newberg group? Is God with you or die? What choice is there? But now Alcoholics Anonymous is so politically correct in certain ways and so available on any corner that we can afford to dummy down the message, maybe to the disadvantage of the new person. It tells us when working with others, don't waste your time on someone who doesn't want it. They're not saying he's not worth it. Don't waste your time trying to persuade him. You may spoil a future opportunity. If I try and help you to get sober too much where your dependence is not on the power or where alcohol doesn't shred you enough, you may be sitting there with a reservation for 25 years like our friend, the retired man who the carpet slipper guy, whatever they call him, who thought, guess what? I can have a drink now and it won't be so bad. There's a lot that goes into this that my prejudice as a sober member of AA may be a stumbling block for a guy who had no idea what the heck I was talking about till I distorted his perception of reality based on my own discrimination or prejudice.
Bill, and that is exactly what I was saying in the beginning of this meeting. Until until I had done the exercise, and that's what Bill is saying. That cake box that we're buying, we follow these instructions to the T, because if we don't, we're not going to get the cake that's on the front of that box. That's this book talks about clear-cut instructions. Now, one of the clear-cut instructions are on page 47. It says, do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. I did not do that. Okay? And that's, however that turned out, eventually I did have someone armed with the facts whose whole deportment shouted at me that she had a solution. And we sat and we looked at the judgments that I had against the spiritual terms. And that really opened me up. It opened me up and it helped me, because it says here, though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty at casting aside such feelings. Once I did that exercise, I was allowed then to cast aside these feelings of prejudice. And so I'm reiterating, please, that is such an important, if you're sponsoring or you're about to sponsor, side note, line out into your book there, this is one of those very vital spiritual exercises that we cannot miss. We cannot, because we need a cornerstone. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In respect, alcohol was a great persuader. Alcoholic destruction. He's talking about alcoholics here, the alcoholic destruction. That line there, faced with this, it finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Step one. Sometimes this was a tedious process. My brother Bill will tell you what a tedious process looks like and how many decades a tedious process can look like. Myself, 3 years, 3 decades. We hope, I hope, Bill and I hope, we hope, Ali, Rob and I, we hope that no one here will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. And guess what? We're ending up on a beautiful promise there, because some of us were. So those hardcore, antagonistic, bristling walls coming up, that prejudice, that attitude, it goes away, because it says there, as some of us were. We're ending on a promise. That's where we're going to wrap it up tonight. Also, before we press stop recording, I just want to say something. The word I came to believe, that a power, step 2, because this is step 2, guys. We just did a little step 2 here with each other. Do this quickly, just a little exercise. I came to believe. I came to the rooms. I finally came out of that befogged state, that brain dead, and then I came to believe. Just like when I was binge drinking for 3-4 weeks, and then eventually with the blackout, I wake up, and it takes me like 20 minutes to come around. And eventually I open up my eyes, I flutter them open. My heart's beating because I don't know whose bed I'm in. Okay, then I'm at home. Okay, now I can manage one eye. Then where's my car keys? Okay. The car's in the driveway. I come to, you don't just wake up. You come to believe. Cool. Bill.
Just 2 things. If you look through this chapter, I found it 7 times and then one other word that describes it. This whole chapter is about prejudice. That word is used specifically. And for those who knew Bill personally, Rob and Ollie and Danny, I wasn't back there, but I got to take their word for it. They said he was a word economist. He never liked to repeat words. Hence, step 6 and 7 use different concepts for the same thing. I challenged the guy on that because I said, if that were the case, why does step 8 and 9 use the same words if he didn't want to repeat himself? But this entire chapter is about prejudice, preconceived notions, how it handicaps the obstinacy, blocks us But more importantly, Bill said to Jesus, he conceded the certainty of a great man, but he had no problem believing in the devil who seemed to be the boss and had him. Alcoholism will make you believe a whole lot of things you don't want to, and recovery will lead you to believe a whole lot of things you didn't know how to. Chapter 4 tells us where God is found. Chapters 5 and 6 tell us when and how to get there. That's amazing.
Woohoo! Thank you. All right. Thanks, Bill. I had fun. Thanks, everyone, for being here with us.